Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie. I am part of the team as well as an academic coach. You've already heard from Nisha and Sarah, and today I will be doing the next presentation in your series of metacognitive presentations. And today we will be focusing on outside of the class studying techniques. I'm really sorry that I'm not able to join you guys during your meeting and had to pre-record this. But you can feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about this presentation via email. And I will share the PowerPoint with you and we will jump right in. Okay. So as I mentioned, today will be the next presentation in your metacognitive presentation series, and it will focus on outside of the class study techniques. So this is our team. Once again, you've heard from Sarah, Anisha, and today you will be hearing from me, and then I will also be presenting next week on our next topic. So before we jump into the PowerPoint presentation, I wanted you to take a minute to reflect on how you usually study outside of the classroom. What are some of your study habits? What have you seen that is effective? Maybe some habits that you have that are not so effective. I just want you to take a moment to reflect on that. I know some people prefer to study at a table without distractions, while other people oftentimes will study in their bedroom, on their bed. So in this comic on the screen, you can see one person is a little more focused, is at a table, everything seems organized, whereas the other person is eating, is sitting in a comfy chair, is on their phone. So maybe they're not as intensely focusing on the content. So I wanted you to take a moment to reflect on some of your habits and what have you seen to be effective? What have you seen to not be as effective? You can feel free to use the chat to communicate with each other. I unfortunately will not be able to answer any questions or address any comments, but feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any more specific questions or have anything to share. Okay, so the first slide that I wanted to cover after you have just finished thinking about some of your study techniques was some of the effective study techniques that people use. Now I want to mention that there are a lot of different study techniques that different people use. Different techniques will be more effective for different people. As we've mentioned in previous presentations, and as many of you know, different people study in different ways and find different techniques effective. So it's very important to try out different things to sort of see what works best for you, because what works for one of your friends might not really work for you. So it's very important to test out different techniques in order to be able to pinpoint what is most effective for you. So these are just some techniques that I think are pretty effective and that research has shown to be effective. One of them is limiting your distractions when you are studying. And you guys were able to see that in the last picture that I showed, and there's another picture on the screen now where you have one person that is sitting at a clean, organized desk, ready to do their work, and the other person is sitting at a cluttered desk with a mess around them. This person seems to be feeling a little overwhelmed. Oftentimes when we're not organized, when there's a lot of distractions, when we're on our phone or if the TV is on in the background, we're not really able to focus as intensely as we would be if there were no distractions. So it's oftentimes a good idea to sit at a table, maybe leave your bedroom, turn off your phone or silence your phone, not have the TV on, and just really focus on the task at hand and on what it is that you are studying. Making a study plan or a schedule is also a good idea, because making a study plan or a schedule shows you the expectation. What are you expected to do? What do you have to cover? What are some of the topics you're focusing on? Maybe write down how long you're planning to study for, when you're going to take a break, space things out a little bit. So that is also helpful in effective studying. Organizing your information is also very important. Organizing your notes, organizing your note cards, whatever it is that you use for studying, having that organized into sections. Maybe one day you're going to read the chapter, the following day you're going to reread your notes, maybe make some flashcards. Having that information organized helps you know what you are studying and will help you not feel as overwhelmed by all the information that you have to learn or memorize, or maybe you're working on an essay or any other homework assignment. So knowing the expectation and having it organized is very helpful. Paraphrasing and condensing your information is also very important, and I will elaborate more on this idea later on in the presentation. I think that sometimes students can feel overwhelmed when they have to cover an entire unit and they have to study several chapters. So really breaking down the information and summarizing it into key points can help you learn better and can help you feel less overwhelmed and lost. Spacing out your study sessions is also very important. Instead of cramming the night before, kind of taking a week to study in lesser time increments. So maybe instead of studying for 6 hours straight, studying for an hour and taking a break, and studying for another hour and taking a break, or maybe you want to study in 30-minute increments and then take a break and study for 30 more minutes and take a break. And I will share some of these techniques later on in the presentation with you. Another point that I wanted to mention is studying less with greater intensity can be also very important. Oftentimes students think that if they study for a long period of time, they're able to cover and retain more information. But research shows that that is oftentimes not the case, because if you're studying in the middle of the night and cramming before an exam and you're not well rested, you are actually not retaining as much information. So you might be studying for a longer period of time, but you're not retaining all of the information that you're going through. If, on the other hand, you are well rested, have had a great meal, and you're focused, you can study for a smaller amount of time and actually retain more of the information that you're going through. So that's also very important to keep in mind. Asking questions when you're confused is also very important. Don't ever be afraid to ask a question or hesitate before asking one. Oftentimes, if you have a question, other people will have that same question. So it is important to ask questions, use office hours, reach out to professors, reach out to classmates to be able to get clarity on whatever it is that you are confused about. As I mentioned before, rest is very, very important. So before sitting down to study, and if you want to have that greater intensity, it is great to rest. Make sure you're getting a good night rest, maybe taking a nap, so that you are able to focus on whatever it is that you are studying. So I wanted to show you this video on different ways to study. They bring up different techniques. They also talk about confidence before an exam. So after you've spent several days studying, being confident in the fact that you are going to be able to succeed. It's a little humorous at the end where they talk about striking a superhero pose and walking into your test prepared and ready and confident. So I will play it now.
For those of us in school who are trying to figure out the most effective way to study, science is here on hand to help. While it has been traditionally thought by many of us over the years that long hours in front of the computer or in the library before an important exam are required to maximize study time, this is actually not the case. So forget about long nights with eyelids drooping over pages and pages of text. Scientific research has expressed quite clearly that that isn't the way to study smart. And it turns out smart studying is a lot more fun than we might have thought. So just what cool techniques work best to maximize those precious days before the big exam? That's what we'll find out in this episode of the Infographic Show, Scientifically Proven Best Ways to Study. First of all, an unlikely helper is exercise. Blood chemistry has been proven to change the way the brain works, as the brain, the happy recipient of vital nutrients through exercise, repays the favor by increasing brain performance in the shape of a better and longer attention span, smoother information processing, and more fluid problem-solving skills. How does this work? Well, exercise releases an important blend of mood-altering hormones, including dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. This neural cocktail greatly enhances brain performance required for study and information retention, so in between study sessions, we should seriously consider hitting the gym, swimming some laps, kicking a ball around, or even dancing a few steps, because any kind of exercise greatly improves brain power. These exercise sessions also help to break up the study sessions, which is crucial to avoiding cramming, a scientifically disproven method. The problem with cramming is that overloaded information does not have a chance to enter the long-term memory. Short-term memory is the free, crazy space within your brain. Information rattles around inside there, but what we need to do is turn that information into knowledge, and that doesn't happen by cramming. The transformation from short-term information into long-term knowledge occurs through repeated exposure to that information, retelling of that information, and reflection of that information. So if you learn about a topic, put down the book, and then hit the gym and reflect up on it, or talk to somebody else who has knowledge on the subject, and then you are far more likely to retain that short-term information and turn it into long-term knowledge. You must also vary your study program. Smart study isn't about just reading the material over and over and over again ad nauseum. Although this may seem like the easiest way, it is totally counterproductive. A 2010 study from Washington University compared the effectiveness of repeated testing over repeated studying and found that testing is far more effective than simply rereading. So in between short exercise and study sessions, why not test yourself now and again? Or better still, find a study partner who is tackling the same subject and test one another. Compare your results, talk about them, and continue your study program in between exercising. There is no reason you should study completely alone, and without adequate testing, you will fail to see where the real information gaps are. Finally, get as much sleep as you can, because sleep is crucial to brain development. When awake for the first few hours in the day, our alpha brainwaves are most active, which is the brain state most suited to the acquisition of information and knowledge. A good study program should not only include exercise, short intense study sessions, and social learning, it should also include a good night's sleep and perhaps, if your day allows it, a cheeky power nap in the afternoon. A nap in the daytime will give you 2 bursts of alpha brainwaves for one day's study, and the benefit of sleep doesn't end there. When you acquire information, brain cells grow new connections that reach out and connect with one another. Sleep helps these cells grow and connect. So if we think of our brain as a tree, sleep is like the Miracle-Gro, and while we sleep, all the tiny branches will grow and flourish. Conversely, all-night study sessions do not work, as our ability to process information is hindered by our restlessness, and the information overload is simply overbearing. Scientific research has shown that it can take up to 4 days for our brains to return back to normal after we've been awake for an entire night. We should also take breaks every hour and not work straight through. Study for an hour, do some exercise, speak to a study friend, and then return to the source material. While some experts might argue, researchers at Stanford School of Medicine agree that playing certain types of music, such as classical, may help students engage in the source material. While some of us prefer complete silence, an uplifting piece of non-distracting music without lyrics may improve mood and increase the chances of information retention. In active learning studies, some scholars have suggested that dopamine is the brain's save button, so some light, uplifting music, a favorite warm drink, and a box of cookies could also help us retain knowledge, as the brain, while in its reward mode, is more receptive to whatever stimuli is present, including that study material. Also, science has shown us that, as ridiculous as it may seem, striking a power pose before entering the exam room may be to our benefit. So think Superman or Wonder Woman. Put your hands on your hips, move your legs apart, chest expanded, deep breath, and say something awe-inspiring. You may want to do this in private, like in the bathroom before a test, but this is completely your own choice. Although you may feel stupid and will probably look a bit odd, this posturing will reduce the stress hormone cortisol and increase testosterone, making you scientifically stronger and better prepared for that test. So, remember to take breaks, sleep, exercise, talk about your material with study pals, strike a pose, and you'll be as good as ready for that test. Are there other tried and true methods that we failed to mention? Let us know in the comments.
So I will stop the video now for time purposes, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. It covered a lot of information. They touched on some of the things that I've discussed earlier, like rest, breaking up your study session. They also touched on playing music, which some people find very helpful when they're trying to study. They also talked about short-term versus long-term memory, so breaking up your study session in order to get the information into your long-term memory. And another thing that they touched on was testing yourself. So instead of just rereading the chapters, rereading the notes, actually taking a break and testing your knowledge and what it is that you are studying to see how much of it you are actually retaining. And as I mentioned before, they covered the superhero pose and kind of giving yourself a boost of confidence before walking into an exam or a presentation, which maybe some of you will find helpful and others maybe not so much. So I wanted to give you another minute to kind of reflect on the study techniques that I've shared with you, as well as the techniques that were covered by the video. Have you used these techniques? And if you have, which ones have worked for you? Which ones maybe not so much? And again, feel free to use the chat to share them with one another. It's sometimes helpful to see what other people are using and if that's effective for them. And maybe you can try out some new techniques. So moving forward, I would like to cover maximizing study time. I think that's very, very important. And I have kind of 4 steps highlighted here. One of them being setting a study goal, really highlighting what it is that you want to focus on, what it is that you want to study. That will help you maximize your time by, really telling yourself what you're going to study, what you need to cover, instead of just feeling overwhelmed and lost amidst all of the information that was presented during class. And minimizing your distractions is also a very important part of maximizing study time. So turning off your phone, maybe finding a quiet place, maybe getting out of your bedroom and sitting at a table. Organizing your information, which I touched on earlier, is very important because once you set that study goal, finding the information necessary to fulfill that goal is also very important. And if your notes and your class materials are not organized, it might be challenging and time consuming for you to actually find the necessary information to study. Also, remember to take study breaks. Going for a walk, relaxing, breaking up your study sessions is extremely important. So don't cram, try to get that information from short-term to long-term memory, which is what the video really focused on. Another thing that I touched on previously was breaking down large topics into segments. So instead of feeling overwhelmed by all of the information that you have to go through and memorize, really taking the entire unit of information and breaking it down into chapters, chapter by chapter, and then even further breaking down those chapters into sections. Taking a one section at a time, maybe making some flashcards that correspond to each section of the chapter, and focusing on mastering one section at a time. Instead of focusing on sort of memorizing the entire unit, taking it section by section and mastering one chapter before moving on to the next is very important. Also, focusing on key concepts can at times be very important. If you're going through a chapter, instead of just reading every single bit of information, maybe focusing on those key concepts that were covered in class during PowerPoint presentations that your professors gave. That can give you a good idea of what is expected for you to know, because oftentimes there's a lot of information that gets covered during a unit, and not all of it is essential for you to know. Taking it piece by piece will help you not to get overwhelmed and in turn help you more effectively learn. So the video that I showed you earlier kind of touched on this idea of learning the content in several different ways. Using different brain pathways when studying is very important. So you can read the chapter silently and then maybe summarize it out loud. You can draw pictures or diagrams that are related to the content which you're going through. Maybe make up a song or an acronym if you're trying to learn dates or different lists. Writing down ideas that you've learned. This can all help you see how much you've learned. If you are first reading through and summarizing and then writing down what you've learned, that can really help you see how much you're actually retaining when you are reading the chapter or summarizing it. And I also think that different people learn in different ways. So if you're trying out these different ways to learning, you can really pinpoint what works best for you. And information can enter our brain through writing and listening and reading. So it's important to try to start studying for your exams or in advance instead of cramming, because if you are cramming, you simply don't have enough time to be able to learn the concepts in different ways. You probably only have time to just reread the chapter. You don't really have time to summarize it and write it down and test your knowledge. One technique that I wanted to cover was the Pomodoro Technique. A lot of people say that it's very helpful, and it focuses on breaking up your studying into increments. So I will play this video now.
The Pomodoro Technique is probably one of the most powerful techniques in all of learning. So I teach a course, Learning How to Learn, that's actually the world's largest massive open online course. We have something like 2 million people. And the Pomodoro Technique is the most popular technique. I hear from literally thousands of people. And I have to give credit to the creator, who was Francesco Cedillo. He developed this technique in the early 1980s. And it's so simple that really anybody can do it. So all you have to do is turn off all distractions. So no little ringy dingies on your cell phone or anything like that. On your computer, you want to turn off any kind of messages that might arise. Set a timer for 25 minutes and then just focus as intently as you can for those 25 minutes. Now, if you're like me, you'll start focusing away and you're working away, and then you look up at the timer and 2 minutes have passed. Then my brain goes, I've only done 2 minutes. I can't do another 23 minutes on this Pomodoro. And I let the thought just go right on by, and I return my focus to whatever I'm working on. And when that 25 minutes is up, I relax a little bit. I turn my attention to something else. Now, I will admit that if I really get into the flow of what I'm doing, that I will continue sometimes. You might wonder why that 25 minutes is the magic number. And the reality is we don't really know. There's not a lot of research on the Pomodoro Technique, which is surprising because it's so incredibly popular and people find it very useful. But there's an interesting tidbit related to the Pomodoro Technique, and that is that when you even just think about something that you don't like very much, it activates a portion of the brain that experiences pain. And so the brain, naturally enough, shifts its attention to something else, anything else, like Facebook or Twitter or something like that. And what you've just done is you've procrastinated. And what the Pomodoro technique does, when you do it, you're setting that timer, you don't want to sit there and think, I am going to finish this homework set, or I'm going to work on this problem and get it all finished. You just want to think, I've got 25 minutes where I just have to work on something. Don't even think about what that something is. What that does is it slips in under your brain's radar. It doesn't activate so much that pain in your brain. And then that pain in the brain, research has shown it lasts for 20 minutes. So if you work for 25 minutes, you will suddenly find yourself getting into the flow because you've gone past that painful period. So the Pomodoro technique is effective in many different, some very subtle ways. And so I highly recommend it.
So I think this video does a good job of focusing on all of the steps of the Pomodoro technique and really explaining to you why it is that they suggest studying for 25-minute increments. I wanted to kind of ask you about what you think about this technique. Have you used it before? Have you found it to be effective? Or maybe you don't think it's that effective and you prefer to study for longer periods of time instead of just 25-minute increments? I hope that you guys were able to reflect on this technique and maybe share some of your ideas with each other using the chat. I just wanted to quickly outline the steps of the Pomodoro technique, which they highlighted in the video, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of visualize them. So the first step that they talked about is choosing your task, which I've also mentioned in my previous slides of actually knowing what it is that you're going to focus on. And then setting a timer for 25 minutes and really intensely working on that task for those 25 minutes, which is another thing that I covered earlier, where if you're studying for a shorter period of time more intensely, it's significantly more effective than if you were studying for long periods of time, but you're not well rested and the intensity is just not there. And really limiting your distractions during that 25-minute period. When the timer goes off, really taking that 5-minute break, getting out of that room where you're studying, moving around, taking a break, getting a drink of water, getting a snack, really standing up and leaving your study space and taking that break is very important. And then they also recommend that after 4 Pomodoro cycles, you take a longer break, maybe 20 minutes, to let your brain digest the information that you have just been studying. And then you can repeat this cycle once again. So some people will find this effective, others might not find it effective, and some people say that they prefer to study for longer periods of time instead of just 25 minutes. Again, I want to highlight that different techniques work for different people. So if something doesn't work for you and you were able to pinpoint that, that is totally fine. Mind mapping is another technique that I wanted to share with you guys. And I think this video does a good job of explaining how to create a mind map. And this touches on that idea of studying in different ways. So maybe reading the chapter and then summarizing the chapter, maybe creating a mind map to be able to visualize that information. Trying to get that information into your brain in different ways can also be very, very helpful.
Welcome to Moo Math and Science and Day 8 of the Tiny Steps Study Challenge. Today, we are going to convert some of your notes into a mind map. A mind map is one way to condense your notes and help you visualize your notes. You can easily convert 2 or 3 pages of notes into a single mind map, which can be used to help you prepare for a test later. We are going to create a single, simple mind map. First, find a page of your recent notes from one of your classes. Second, create a mind map from these notes. Here are a couple guidelines about mind maps. First, place the main topic in the middle. You can write the topic or you can draw it. Next, create branches from this main topic in the middle, and these are your subtopics. And then you can create branches from your subtopics. You can draw pictures or you can just write it out. Remember, there are not any rules. Create something that works for you. Some people like to have lots of pictures. Other people like to have a minimum amount of pictures, or maybe no pictures. You can also use a program called mindmapfree.com that can help you create your mind map. Once a mind map is created, you can use the mind map to help you study for your next test. That's it for today. As always, remember.
So I liked how this video highlighted the different ways that you can create a mind map. Again, some people will prefer to write things down. Other people might prefer to actually draw things out. It just kind of depends on what techniques you prefer. So maybe first trying it out both ways and seeing what works best for you might be a good idea. But again, it highlights that idea of different things will work for different people. Another question that I have for you is, do you think that this is a good technique to use when preparing for a test or condensing your notes? Do you think that this would work for you? Or do you think that drawing out all of these concepts is actually just a waste of time? So I want you to take a minute to reflect on that and maybe share some of your thoughts with each other using the chat. So in summary, I wanted to just highlight the different learning techniques that we have covered and their utility. So here you see in this picture, they're broken down where high utility is practice and test your knowledge using practice tests and actually seeing whether you are retaining the information that you are learning. Disturbed practice is another one on the high utility, and it is spreading out your spreading out your study sessions over time. And then there's some moderate utility techniques and some lower utility techniques. And you guys will have access to a PDF of these slides, so you can take a closer look at these, but I won't cover them in great detail for the sake of time. So once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any questions about the presentation, or if you have any general questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll test out some of these techniques that we covered today.